faces a choice. This is Battleground America. Here's Tara Servatius.
I can't believe I'm watching this. The DA of New York just greenlighted armed robbery. Folks, you can't even make this up. Literally rung the dinner bell for attacks, armed attacks on New York businesses. The place is going to become uninhabitable, unvisitable. Listen to how bad this is. The new DA of New York, Alvin Bragg, just announced that he had ordered his DAs to stop seeking prison sentences for pretty much everything except homicide, domestic violence felonies, some sex crimes. Well, you're going to be some sex crimes there's no prison for? Okay. And public corruption. That's it. Everything else, well, bring it. This is so outrageous that he actually produced a memo directing his DAs that armed robbers who use guns or other deadly weapons to hold up stores and other businesses will be prosecuted only for petty larceny, a misdemeanor, provided no victims were, are you ready for this? Seriously injured. Okay, so what? You just pistol whipped her? But she wasn't that seriously injured. And listen, she handed over the cash like she was, instructed to. So it's all good. It's fine. Misdemeanor, no big deal. Wow. Normally, in the past, armed robbery, a Class B felony, would be punishable by a maximum of 25 years in prison. Holy cow. But this new New York City DA was just getting started. He then rung the dinner bell for burglars. Yep, burglars who steal from residential areas. Listen to this. If you rob parts of the home that aren't accessible to a living area, like a garage or a shed, guess what? Yeah, you guessed it. Misdemeanor or low-level Class D felony. Ditto for if you rob business storage areas, as long as they're not connected to some sort of living area. So I guess what you do is you go on down to the Saks Fifth Avenue, pistol whip the cashier because she's not handing you the goods fast enough. Make sure you don't hurt her too bad. And then when you're done, go out to the storage warehouse and help yourself to whatever's there. It's all good. What's so jaw-dropping is that he actually announced this, put the memo out, like he wanted criminals to know they'd just been greenlighted. He could have just implemented these policies internally, but that wasn't enough. He wanted them to know it's party time. Those shocking new sentencing guidelines that I just read to you are from the New York Post. Bob McManus wrote another piece for the Post about it called Manhattan's Progressive New DA, Alvin Bragg, just gave a green light for anarchy. That's exactly what he did. He writes specifically, Bragg says his office, quote, will not seek carceral sentence for anything short of murder or deadly assault. Carceral being progressive doublespeak for prison, he writes. Also, he says minor crime won't be prosecuted at all. Oh, and I forgot to tell you about the drug dealers. Yeah, if it used to be they'd let you off on a misdemeanor, it is right now actually in New York for possession. No. Now they're letting what they call low-level drug dealers off on misdemeanors too. So they're only going after the heavyweight drug dealers. And they'll only be minimally inconvenienced. He writes, in other words, jail is to be reserved for axe murderers and their ilk, armed robbers, and heavyweight drug dealers are to be minimally inconvenienced, and just forget about the quality of life law enforcement that was the beating heart of the Giuliani era rescue of New York City decades ago. Victims, ? He writes, let them hunker down and hope for the best. No place for them in Manhattan anymore. And Mayor Eric Adams can just forget about his oft-promised crackdown on the city's dangerously rising crime rates because there is no point in picking up criminals if you have no place to put them. He is exactly right. The police aren't going to risk themselves going after these people just to watch them laugh and go right back out the door with no carceral sentence. But once you understand where the Democrats are going with this at the national level, it all makes sense. Remember Joe Biden promising to release 50% of the federal prison population off the top? Remember, federal prisoners aren't like state prisoners. They're much worse. In fact, they are the worst of the worst. And he wants to just let half of them go because why not? Here's Joe from 2020 on the campaign trail promising to let him go. Just clean out half the prisons.
Do you commit to cutting incarceration by 50% if elected?
We can do it more than that. There should be no... look, get his name. I'll send you exactly what my program is.
But is it a yes or no?
Yeah, the answer is yes.
Thank you.
But I got a better plan than you guys have.
I can't wait to hear it.
Folks need to understand the left isn't joking around. They don't see this as crime. Not at all. They see crime as a necessary means to redistribution. Again, I'm going to go back to this because you can really see the mentality that's developing here. Back on November 7th, Fox News article headline, San Francisco Chronicle ripped for asking residents if they should tolerate burglaries. Those were the actual words printed in an actual newspaper. And just for good measure, they tweeted it too. Here's how the Fox News article starts. Social media users wondered if the San Francisco Chronicle had published satire when the outlet asked if residents should start to tolerate burglaries as part of their everyday life amid a recent crime surge. The specific question was, should they just tolerate them or should they barricade their homes? It wouldn't, after all, be fair to actually prosecute the burglars because, well, they're entitled to your stuff. This is a key, classic Marxist mentality. It's taking over the government. If you own a, high-end store in New York, well, why shouldn't other people be entitled to your stuff? And as long as they don't kill you taking it, but only hurt you a little bit, why, that's only fair. They should have that stuff anyway. If you're a true Marxist, you really can't argue with that much. After all, when Marxism is actually implemented, that's exactly what Marxists do. You and I have been over that before many times. Again, the Soviet Union, they didn't just take your property and own all the property. That's the theft part. They redistributed it. So if you were a middle-class family with 3 bedrooms and 2 baths in your home, you got to live in one of the bedrooms with your entire family, and they moved 2 other families into the other 2. So the idea that burglary would be problematic in a society where everything's going to be owned by the state and divvied up anyway, well, you can see the problem there, morally and mentally, for the left. And this is exactly where they're going. And it will only hasten the breakup of the country, given their other achievements. As I've said many times, folks, if I actually set out with my goal, policy-wise, being to achieve the highest ever 1-year increase in homicides in the United States of America, I'd be pretty stressed out, especially if I had only 1 year to do it. It wouldn't be easy, but they pulled it off. A single year, 30% average across the board homicide increase in America, the largest ever 1-year jump in crime history. It's an astonishing achievement, and this mentality is exactly how we got there. This mentality will also hasten the breakup of the country as blue areas simply become uninhabitable. I can imagine at this point actually taking my family on vacation to New York City, which is a shame because it's one of the places the kids keep telling me they want to see. But don't make the mistake of actually thinking the left doesn't like law enforcement. They love law enforcement. Don't kid yourself. The only beef they have with local police officers is that those officers don't answer to them, don't answer the Democrat Party, the way it is in Marxist societies, where the intelligence agencies and the party itself are virtually inseparable, and the intelligence agencies function as the long arm of the party, not as actual criminal justice operations. So ultimately, the problem for the left is not that cops arrest people or even that they're brutal or unfair. It's just that they don't have the ability to control them and turn them against their enemies. Yet. This is fascinating, folks. Think back to the left's hatred. Really, we've seen it in the modern era, starting with Obama. Absolute, irrational, statistically unjustified hatred of law enforcement. I mean, this is a country. You realize, by the way, through the end of 2020, only 5 unarmed people were killed by cops in the entire country. That's down from the high 20s the year before and 36 before the year before that. This is simply not a problem in this country. So what's the left's beef? What's incredible is that they actually love law enforcement. It's just certain law enforcement that they love, namely the Federal Bureau of Investigation, whose officers were seen during the whole George Floyd debacle kneeling to Black Lives Matter in front of the FBI building. Look it up. The picture is stunning. But do the people get it? Are they beginning to understand? Yes. According to a Rasmussen poll just conducted and released Tuesday of likely voters, listen to this. This is fascinating. Democrats report at a staggering rate of 63% that they have a favorable impression of the FBI. They love the FBI. What about Republicans? How favorable is their impression after about 5 years of repression and political oppression by the FBI toward Republicans and Donald Trump? Heck, they made up the whole Russia collusion narrative in cahoots with Hillary and a Russian spy, broke multiple laws to do it, and ignored others broken by Hillary to do it. What do the Republicans think about the FBI? Only 38% have a favorable impression. Yep, 56% of Republicans don't. But remember, one of the hallmarks of an authoritarian regime is the merging of the intelligence agencies and the party that rules the country. Do we have that here now? This is the most fascinating part of the survey. Trump advisor Roger Stone, who was politically persecuted by the FBI, who tarred him as a felon, then ultimately dropped the charges against him on the eve of the election. They needed to make it look like everyone around Trump was a criminal. This is what they do. They're a political hit squad, a goon squad, a personal Gestapo, if you will. That's what Roger Stone called them. So in the poll, the Rasmussen pollsters actually asked Americans if they believe the FBI functions as Democrat President Joe Biden's personal Gestapo, quote unquote. What do you think Americans said? These numbers are so high, they shock me. 46% of voters agreed that the FBI now functions as Joe Biden's personal Gestapo. 38% disagreed. So you have a plurality of 46% of voters saying, yep, absolutely, the FBI functions as Joe Biden's personal Gestapo, and just 38% who disagree. That's incredible. Then Rasmussen went for broke and asked this question. Is there a group of politicized thugs at the top, this is the actual wording, at the top of the FBI, who are using the FBI as Joe Biden's personal Gestapo? Get this. 64% of Republicans agreed. 47% of unaffiliated voters agreed. And here's the interesting part to me. Almost a third of Democrats agreed. 30%. So they can see it too. So let's paint the whole picture and tie the whole podcast together. A picture of law enforcement as used by the Democrats. Remember yesterday's podcast? Hope you listened to it. It was a really good one, where I talked about why medical treatment, specifically monoclonal antibodies, were being denied to whites, even those who were very sick, but given, according to CDC dictates, to those who were brown or black, even if they weren't as sick. They literally specifically wrote that out as the guidelines. Well, what's going on there? I told you yesterday that what's actually going on there is a very crude form of USSR-style Marxism, where your access to everything, food, a job, medical care, even life itself, is determined by your loyalty to the party. You have to understand how they think to understand what's going on in this country. So yesterday we had actual audio of a white guy being denied monoclonal antibodies and flat out told that it's because he's white and that if he was brown or black, he could have them. What are the Democrats doing here? Well, they can't deny you medical treatment yet for not being a member of the party in good standing. Yet. So they're using a proxy. Race. Odds are that black or brown people are more likely to vote Democrat. Well, what's going on here? The same thing. If you look at the Manhattan DA, this is a mentality. To combat it, you got to look at it in its totality. The Manhattan DA, like most Marxists, looks at criminals as more than likely to be members of the party, Democrat voters. And he's right. Criminals tend to vote Democrat at an 80% plus rate when they vote. So, what is he saying? The law simply doesn't apply to them. Who is the most likely to be burglarized? Who's the most likely to own a shop worth stealing with a gun to somebody's head? Probably somebody most likely to vote Republican or somebody affluent. In other words, less likely to be a member in good standing of the Democrat Party. These are proxies. They can't go get your party registry right now. They can't go get your voting history right now and dole out things like this according to that yet. But that's exactly how things operated in the USSR. Again, I've told you this many times. One of the best examples of that is the book by Ayn Rand, We the Living, which is the closest to an autobiography she'd ever write. She was writing about what life was like in Russia after the revolution and how your whole life was centered around being thought of well by the party. And they kept you busy with this near 12 hours a day. If you wanted to have a good ration card, one where they didn't run out of the food before it was your place in line, you had to have a good job. You don't earn a good job in that kind of society by being a good worker. Oh, far from it. You earn a good job by being in good stead with the party. And so in order to be in good stead with the party, you had to spend most of your waking hours outside of work, not with your family, but volunteering for the party, pamphleteering for the party, going to reading groups where you studied party history, things like that. In other words, they kept you very busy. You had almost no free time because you were doing party activities. Because if you didn't, you wouldn't have a good job. And if you didn't have a good job, you wouldn't get a good ration card. And if you didn't get a good ration card, you'd get almost nothing to eat. And forget a warm jacket or clothes in the winter. And if that happened, you'd be forced onto the black market or you'd starve to buy stuff. Going to the black market, that's illegal. Guess where you're going? The gulag. And odds are pretty good you're not coming out again. So it was literally a life, or it was literally a death sentence to not be in good stead with the party. There was no way it could end well. There was no way it could end any other way than you becoming a criminal. Now look at how the FBI is functioning. Look at the Democrats' love for the FBI and how they use them. This is a law enforcement branch they love because it's a model for the future for the rest of them. That's why these two stories are tied. This is the same mentality. I've called it dual justice for years. Call it whatever you want. It's classic Soviet-style Marxism. Thanks for listening to today's podcast. If you want to get it automatically when it comes out, download the Odyssey app, AUDACY, and subscribe.
Battleground America with Tara Servatius. Please subscribe on the Odyssey app or wherever you get your favorite podcasts. Share with friends, family, and other free thinkers. Thanks for listening.